Good afternoon, my name is Kyle Clausen, and I'm presenting a strategic inspection readiness plan for Pharm Therapeutics. This is a biopharmaceutical company that has just submitted a biologics license application, a BLA, for a sterile injectable biologic targeting genetic markers in ALS. The pivotal phase 3 trial was conducted entirely outside of the United States, across 10 international sites coordinated by a specialized CRO. Given the BLA is now under review, an FDA bioresearch monitoring and inspection of the CRO and clinical sites is highly likely. Over the course of this presentation, I will lay out the regulatory framework that governs this inspection, the specific risks created by how this trial was designed and operated, and a step-by-step readiness plan, as well as a recommendation on how to position the company for a clean inspection closeout. 4 facts about this trial deserve to be on the table from the start. First, the trial is 100% foreign. 10 international sites, no US participation. That alone changes how the FDA will approach this inspection because foreign-only datasets supporting a BLA receive heightened scrutiny. Second, ALS is a rare, fatal neurodegenerative disease, and this is a genetic marker-targeted biologic. That combination, first-in-class, vulnerable population, high unmet need, means regulatory visibility on this program is going to be high. Third, source documents were captured on paper and then transcribed into an open-source clinical research platform with cloud storage. That's the single highest risk technical area in this trial, and we'll come back to that in future slides. Fourth, the trial uses both therapeutic efficacy and quality of life endpoints. Both have to be inspection ready with documented evaluator training and validated instruments. The BIMO program operates through 11 multi-centered compliance programs. 2 of them apply directly to this BLA. Compliance Program 7348.810 governs the FDA's inspection of sponsors, contract research organizations, and monitors. This is where the sponsor's oversight of the CRO will be examined. The transfer of obligations agreement, monitoring plan execution, IND safety reporting, financial disclosure forms, and how Pharm Therapeutics selected and supervised its investigators. Compliance Program 7348.811 governs inspections of clinical investigators. This is the site-level review. Protocol adherence, source data integrity, informed consent, drug accountability, adverse event capture, and IRB approvals. The point I want to emphasize is that these 2 programs operate in parallel for a BLA, and we need to prepare both sides of the interface. A sponsor with great oversight, but a sloppy site will fail, and a great site with no documented sponsor oversight will also fail. When the FDA inspects foreign sites for a BLA, they don't pick at random. They look at which sites contributed pivotal data, which sites had the highest enrollment, which sites show outlier safety or efficacy signals, and which sites have prior compliance history concerns. In this trial, every site enrolled the same number of subjects, so enrollment volume isn't a discriminating factor, but that perfectly equal distribution of itself is itself a flag that we'll come back to in a few slides. The practical takeaway is on the right side of this slide, that all 10 sites have to be inspection ready. Foreign site visits are typically not announced far in advance, and if we prepare only the 3 sites we think are most likely to be picked, we are guaranteeing that the one site the FDA actually picks will be the one that wasn't ready. So universal readiness is the only defensible posture. The inspection readiness program has 7 steps. The first 4 are foundational. First, step 1, stand up the readiness team. This is led by regulatory affairs, but it is genuinely cross-functional. We're thinking clinical ops, QA, medical, pharmacovigilance, biostatistics, data management, and CMC. The CRO is embedded as a co-owner, not a downstream vendor. Weekly cadence, a single shared risk register, all the way through approval. For step 2, let's think about the gap assessment. Within 60 days of BLA filing, we assess the program against the BIMO checklist for both compliance programs. We are looking at the trial master file, every investigator site file, monitoring records, drug accountability logs, financial disclosure forms, and IND safety reports. Gaps get classified as critical, major, or minor with named owners and due dates. For step 3, run mock inspections at the highest risk sites. We hire an external GCP auditor and run 2 or 3 full mock inspections, including a simulated FDA 482, a mock 483, and a written response. These findings feed straight into the CAPA workstream. For step 4, train the people who will face the inspectors, the investigators, the coordinators, the CRO staff, a refresher on the ICH E6R3 and the protocol and consent administration, on source documents, on AE reporting, and critically, train them on how to behave during an actual inspection, how to answer factually, how to retrieve documents, and how to take contemporaneous notes. Steps 5 through 7 are about locking down what we have and being ready to respond. Step 5, lock and validate the trial master file. We do a 3-way reconciliation between the sponsor TMF, the CRO TMF, and each investigator site file against the DIA TMF reference model. Anything missing gets reconstructed with a documented justification, and then we lock it and index it for rapid retrieval because during an inspection, the FDA will ask for documents and they expect them to be produced quickly. Step 6, front room, back room. We designate an inspection lead, a scribe, a runner, and an on-call subject matter experts. The back room retrieves documents, drafts, responses, and maintains the inspection log. Same structure replicated at each site. This is rehearsal, not improvisation. For step 7, we pre-stage the 483 response. If we receive a form 483 at any site, we have 15 business days to respond. We pre-draft the response framework, corrective action, preventative action, evidence of completion, as well as timeline, so that we can adapt to the specific observations rather than starting from a blank page under time pressure. Now, this is a slide I want to spend some additional time on because this is the single highest technical risk in the trial. The combination is paper source documents transcribed by hand into a cloud-hosted open source clinical research platform. So each piece of this creates risk. Paper to electronic transcription introduces transcription errors. Open source software introduces validation questions. Cloud hosting introduces vendor qualification, data residency, backup, and access control questions. The FDA inspectors evaluate this against 2 frameworks. First, the 21 CFR Part 11 for electronic records and electronic signatures, and second, the Alcoa Plus data integrity principles. Attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, plus complete, consistent, enduring, and available. We mitigate this in 4 ways. We validate the platform, system risk assessment, validation protocols, validation reports, all documented for this specific configuration. We make sure the audit trail captures user, timestamp, the prior and new value, and the reason for every change. We reconcile paper source against the electronic record with a second person verification or a system enforced control, and we qualify the cloud environment, provider qualification, role-based access, periodic user access reviews. If we get this wrong, every other piece of inspection readiness is undermined because the data underlying the BLA stops being trustworthy. There are 2 enrollment patterns in this trial that any seasoned inspector is going to flag, and we need our story straight on both before the FDA shows up. The first is the female enrollment ratio at 25%. ALS does have a male predominance in incidence, so a male skewed enrollment isn't disqualifying, but the FDA increasingly expects sponsors to justify the ratio quantitatively, to pre-specify subgroup analysis by sex, and to address diversity in the BLA narrative under the Fedora Diversity Action Plan framework. We need to walk in with epidemiology data that supports the ratio and a documented recruitment plan. The second is more subtle, and I think it's the more dangerous one. Every site enrolled exactly 10 patients, 10 subjects. In a multi-center international trial of 100 patients, perfectly equal enrollment across 10 sites is statistically unusual. To an inspector, that pattern can read as enrollment caps, as coordinated across sites, or as selective enrollment. The defense here is documentation. The enrollment cap, if there is one, needs to be in the protocol and in the IRB submission at each site. The randomization scheme needs to be documented, and the source data review at the highest enrolling site should confirm consistency between the screening logs, the eligibility checklists, and the randomized population. If we have all of that, the equal enrollment is explainable. If we don't, it's a finding waiting to happen. Subject protection documentation gets reviewed in every BIMO inspection. The standard checks are on the left side: IRB approvals at every site for every amendment, informed consent forms in the local language with documented translations, reconsent following risk-altering amendments, and confirmation that consent was obtained before any study procedures. The ALS-specific layer is on the right, and it matters because ALS is a fatal neurodegenerative disease. Cognitive capacity at consent is not always intact, especially in patients with bulbar onset disease or frontotemporal involvement. The protocol needs a defined approach to legally authorized representatives, and we need documented reevaluation of consent capacity as the disease progresses over the trial. For genetic marker targeted enrollment, the inspector will also want to see how eligibility was verified at consent. This is the kind of area where one site doing it slightly differently from the protocol creates a finding, where universal training on the consent process, including capacity assessment, is part of step 4 of the readiness plan to avoid this. For BIMO purposes, the inspectors are going to trace endpoint data through 3 stages: at the source, in the case report form, and in the analysis dataset. At the source, were validated assessment instruments used? Were the evaluators trained? And is the training documented? Are the source records complete? In the case report form, asking, was the source faithfully transcribed? Is there an audit trail of any changes? Are deviations from the assessment schedule logged with rationale? And in the analysis, asking the questions, does the analysis dataset reconcile back to the CRF and source? Was the statistical analysis plan adhered to as pre-specified, particularly the primary endpoint definition and the handling of missing data? The bottom strip flags the highest frequency finding for patient-reported outcomes in international trials. The PRO instrument must be validated tool with documented translations and cultural adaptations across all 10 sites. Language harmonization is where this kind of trial most often gets a finding. So we want to confirm that the translation certification, back translation records, and cognitive debriefing for each language version are all on file. The BIMO site inspection is separate from the BLA pre-license inspection of the manufacturing facility, which CBER conducts under 21 CFR 600 series. But site-level product handling is the scope for BIMO, and there are 4 areas the inspectors will look at. Drug accountability logs need to be complete, contemporaneous, and reconciled at study and at every site, not mostly complete, but really fully complete. Cold chain monitoring for a sterile injection biologic is critical. Continuous temperature logs and any excursion documented with an impact assessment that asks, did this excursion compromise product quality, and what do we do about it? Or what did we do about it? Lot to subject traceability ties each administered dose to a specific lot, a specific subject, and a documented administration record. Now, this is one of the questions that comes up in almost every BIMO inspection, and is one of the easiest to answer well if the records are tied. End of study reconciliation and return procedures need to be documented and actually executed per protocol, not improvised at closeout. Not every risk deserves equal investment, so here's how I'd rank the work streams for clarity. And P1 being the top priority, this is the data integrity stack around the open source platform and paper-to-cloud transcription, and the universal readiness across all 10 foreign sites. Either of these going wrong really kills the inspection. For P2, the medium likelihood, high impact items are the documenting the equal enrollment pattern and reconciling the trial master file across sponsor, CRO, and sites. For P3, the medium likelihood, medium impact items, translation and cultural adaptation of the pro instrument, the ALS specific consent capacity documentation, and drug accountability at the cold chain and the cold chain at sites. These are well-trodden ground, and competent CRO partners should already have most of this in shape, but they need to be verified, not assumed. For P4, this is the female enrollment justification. Important to get it right in the BLA narrative, but unlikely to be the focus of the inspection itself, given ALS epidemiology. This priority ranking drives where the readiness team spends its weeks 1 through 12 after BLA submission. How to win the inspection. So 3 things executed in parallel from now until approval. 1, the readiness program is sponsor-led, but the CRO is a co-owner, not a vendor. one team, one risk register, one cadence all the way through. Second, data integrity comes first. The paper-to-cloud workflow on open source software is the single biggest exposure in this trial. Fix that before anything else, because a Part 11 finding on the underlying database invalidates everything that sits on top of it. And 3, universal site readiness across all 10 sites at the same standard. FDA tends to pick foreign sites late in the review cycle, and the site they pick is the site that wasn't ready. The math says prepare them all or accept the risk that the one we left unprepared is the one we're inspected on. The bottom line, and the way I would frame this for the CRO, treat the inspection as an extension of the development program, not a downstream compliance event. If we do that, the material reduces the risk of an observational finding delaying the BLA approval, and we position the program for a clean inspection closeout. Thank you. This is the reference slide that lists the BIMO compliance programs, the ICH GCP guideline, and the relevant CFR sections on which this plan was built. Thank you.